Hello and welcome to the Asian American Forward podcast. My name is Katie Simpson. I'm here with my regular co-host, Don Sun, and we have another guest this week, kind of continuing our series of interviewing New York City Council candidates. Hi, Chen. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. This is Don Sun, co-host with Katie, and we have a good, young, handsome guy hiding there.
Well, we're really excited to talk to you today, and we might have a surprise guest joining us later, so that should be really great. But we have usually given our candidates a chance to introduce themselves to the audience before doing anything else. So Hailing, do you just have the quick bumper sticker kind of summary that you give to people when you're introducing yourself to strangers?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Chen. I started as a Uber drivers after I graduated from the college. Just like so many other, college students, when they graduate, they cannot find a job. They find an entry-level job. I found, to be driving for Uber, and then I become the labor organizer with the Independent Driver Guild, which is trying to figure out a way to organize the gig economy workers in New York cities. So I fought for a couple campaign that successfully were able to secure like minimum pay, tipping options, and benefits for Uber drivers. And everything we have done for the last couple of years is historical. So and then I get into the politics. And I become the first Fujianese ever to run for the office in New York State.
And is this your first time running?
Yes, correct.
So what kind of prompted you to make that switch from labor activism into kind of running for an official position? And also why city commission? Why is that the particular position that you chose?
First of all, I love my job as a labor organizer, as a advocate for the gig economy workers. But I think with the position that I can be holding as a councilman, will enable me to even not just serving a community of drivers, but also serving our own community. A community has been suffering a lot from the pandemic, a community that have been ignored, particularly, the fashion with a very diverse group of people. We have South Asian, we have Koreans, we have, Spanish, in my district. I think, it's a leadership that has to carry on from what we have right now, and to further, demonstrate that the young energetic leadership can serve the people with the passion, with the enthusiasm. So I'm very proud that I think it's a very different world. We live in a 21st century, but we have a lot of the policy that's made like a few decades ago, never gonna be, able to have to be a good policy, as of today. So.
Yeah, and I want to ask also specifically with your particular focus on ride-share drivers like Uber and Lyft, that's been such a contentious issue, especially in the last couple of years here in California. We had a proposition passed this year related to that. And I think something that really has gone underlooked in this sort of past year of the pandemic is the way in which Uber and Lyft drivers and also restaurant workers and people like that who have been a part of your platform are essential workers and are kind of suffering just as much as maybe doctors and nurses are under these working conditions, but haven't had the same level of attention kind of poured towards them. So I'm wondering what the biggest thing you've learned through the pandemic has been, kind of with specific focus on these labor issues.
I think the biggest problem that Uber drivers have is a lack of the protection, the lack of anything else that a traditional employee taking for granted. There's no there's no such thing as a minimum pay. There's no such thing as a benefit, but we fought and we fight, and we think the Uber driver can have a voice on the table with a 3.3 million Uber driver in United States. So we have this huge group of excluded workers, the huge group of people who are usually voiceless, and through the unions, they're able to become powerful. And I think the question is, it's really about the transition of the time, because we live in a very different time where people become an Uber driver because they want the freedom of their schedule time. People chose this job because of the flexibilities, and not like employee, right? And now, I think, our law by classifying workers, simply as employee or independent contractor doesn't work anymore. We need to find a middle ground where a worker can actually able to work whenever they want, and but also have a bargaining powers with the employers. And that's the third model that we are trying to do. And I think it's very significant, and that answers a lot of the questions, at the law level.
Hailing, I have been back and forth from California to New York almost in weekly basis. So every time I went to New York, and I'm going to go there next week too. So I really want to know, based on your understanding, what's your campaign status, how you evaluate your campaign path to the victory, and how many votes you secure, especially what's your thinking about the ranked choice voting system, how you apply that new voting system to your particular campaign strategy. And also the last one is in terms of fundraising, what's the status in terms you compare with your money with your competitors? So just give us some broader picture of your campaign status.
Yeah. So first of all, we did allow the outreach. We knock on more than 7,000. I believe more than 7,000 doors. We gave out 20,000 flyers. We phone bank 5,000 people, and we actually pull out few hundred, if not 1,000 posters, across the functions. And in terms, I think my campaign is the staff, especially the volunteer, are really working hard and to make a history, right? Because the young people of my generation, right, of our generation, is that we don't see a lot of hope. The young people is not moving out of house, and to take on the first step, to become the candidate, of my background to run. I think that demonstrates that the young people are able to do something, and with the energies and the passions of young people to serve a community 24/7, that is a huge deal. We can have a councilman who is going to go out, to to the different places 11 p.m. Is that passion? That's what people needed. And in terms of my fundraising, right, we raised more than $40,000. I didn't do a very aggressive fundraising, in terms of like gathering people's, but we got like more than 500 unique donor. That is like comparable to other people who other most people consider as like fund runner, but that demonstrate that we have a support. Some of those donation is actually come from the drivers, and we have the lower amount of donation, but we're doing pretty good. So compared to other campaign, we raised the same amount, if not more, money than other candidates. So I think with the ranked choice voting, and people is actually, looking for someone, who is going to want to, change the community. And I am, compare my age to the second youngest candidate, I'm like 18 years younger. I have more energy, and I wanted to, to help. Yeah, and we can do it. And one of a very big thing I want to demonstrate for my campaign: don't let anybody tell you cannot do something. If I can do it, everybody else can do it. Nothing is impossible, but it's the imagination that you have limit what you want to do in your life.
Hailin, and I do have one more question, but before I jump into the next question, I just want to welcome my friend and a very knowledgeable political consultant, Trip Young, and he just joined here. And hi, Trip, say hi to Asian American.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Hey,
Hi.
good evening to Dawn, to Katie, to Hailin, and all the listeners of the podcast. It's a pleasure to join you all, and I look forward to speaking with you soon after Hailin wraps up his segment.
Yeah, I have one more question to Hailin. Hailin, you have identified, you have one unique background is about Uber drivers. Also, you emphasize you're coming from mainland China, especially from Fujian province. And I know it's around the country, there's millions of Fujianese, and you are their hope. And how you can say you can utilize these two pretty unique advantages to run your campaign.
Yeah, so I mean, this combination of uniqueness, and I would say, I would say that, it's a very special time where we have 3 Fujianese candidates, not just me. And, I happen to be, the first one to register and announce my candidacies. But we have 2 more young people to kind of step out. And it's really kind of becoming a very important chapter for Fujianese immigrants to run for the office. And, I don't want my campaign to have any, more special than others, but I think my campaign definitely can inspire some people and more people to run, and more awareness in the community, such as a Fujianese community. But also on the other side, I am in I came from a industry where it's pretty new, but they expand exponentially over the last couple of years. And we have so many people that's undefined, and there are so many laws around this whole industry. Is being undefined. It's being negligent for the last couple of decades. No one thought this can come so fast, and that's why we need to have a leadership who understand the challenge of our time, who experience the challenge of our time, and to be able to come out with a solution that is going to work for the good of the society.
Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to ask one last question to you, Hailin, which is that, so you moved to, remind me how old you were when you moved to New York City.
Oh, 14 years old.
14, so perfect. We've been asking a lot of our candidates also to kind of reflect on what the biggest change they've seen in the city in their life there. And then coming off of that, what's the biggest change you've seen? And what do you think the biggest challenge is facing New York City within the next year?
I think, let me answer the latter question first. I think, with the next years, if we got enough votes, if we come out to participate in this civic process, we can have a brand new leadership where people going to, change, going to see a hope of infrastructures, of cleanliness of communities. So I think, these are important, right? In terms of what are the huge change I saw since I came here, there's a lot of the developments, right? A lot of the development, but I haven't seen a lot of the positive change in New York, in my community. The road is still very messy, very rocky. We're still seeing, the a lot of the churches going, around, and and there's so much more change, in terms of the pandemic. The restaurant are shutting down, the hotel are shutting down. So who gonna be the savior, of this disaster? Who gonna really take on the role and carry us to the next level? I think that's a very important topic we need to think about, and that's why I encourage every single one of you have to come out, have to vote, no matter who you vote for. Vote for your choice.
Thank you.
Yeah, good advice. Well, I want to bring Trip in since we only have a few minutes, or getting shorter on time. But Trip, I'll give you the same opportunity that we gave Hailing before you arrived, which is, do you want to introduce yourself to our audience just in 1 or 2 minutes?
Hey everyone, good evening. This is Trip Yang. It's a pleasure to be here with all the listeners of the Asian American Forward podcast. And Dawn, Katie, thank you for inviting me. Hailing, it's an honor to share the panelist stage with you. My name is Trip Yang. I am a political democratic strategist. For the past decade, I am based in New York City. I've done 3 presidential campaigns and worked and run campaigns in 7 states, but my biggest area of focus has been New York City, where I have helped elect many of the top candidates, I should say many of the top elected officials in New York, including the only statewide elected official of color, Tish James, and the only citywide elected official of color, Jumaane Williams, and a whole host of other elected officials. Here in New York City, I run my own political consulting firm, which is one of the only Asian American founded and led political consulting firms in New York. I have the honor of working with the great Don's son on the mayoral campaign of Andrew Yang. And I have a host of other Asian American and other candidates of color that I am consulting for this cycle. And it's an honor to be here with everyone. I look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, Trip, let's just got a couple of professional questions to you. And I think Katie is more interesting in your personal stories. Let me ask more professional. You just mentioned that you are the only Asian-run political campaign.
One of the only.
Yeah, one of the many.
I don't like to exaggerate.
Yes. But at least for my past 10, 20 years of political experience, I see very, very few the Asian or especially Chinese American to run the political campaign and with a professional knowledge and skill and network. So that's why I'm thinking what's your plan to expand your territory from New York and to the national level? What's your ambition and what's the knowledge base and what's the resource and skill you can think you can go to the national level to run more campaigns next year? Okay, I think 2022 is going to be a big year for the Asian candidate. There's a lot of opportunities. That's why I asked this question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. My own consulting firm is expanding and growing. We do a lot of races in New York City this election cycle, but to your point, 2022 is a big year nationally. There are going to be many candidates across the country, many Asian American and other candidates across the country, in states like California and states like Massachusetts and all over. And so, we look forward as a political consulting firm to expand. We work with anyone who shares our values of a more inclusive, democratic, and progressive society that particularly uplifts immigrants and communities of color. And so, we look forward to expanding and bringing our talents and onto more of the national stage in 2022.
Thank you. Before I turn the mic to Katie, and I just have one more question. Most time when I do the political, I'm not a consultant, but I do a lot of fundraising for the Asian politicians or candidate. There's a very, very tricky issue always pending and hanging in my mind is if there have two Asian candidates run against each other, what's your judgment how you can generally solve the problem like this?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and this comes up in various communities, communities that are underrepresented, whether it's a historically Black community and having multiple Black candidates, or having a similar scenario coming up with the Latino community or the Muslim community, etc. This scenario is not uncommon. We are seeing this in many of the New York City council races currently this year. And I would say, if there's an opportunity for that city or that state or that election to do ranked choice voting, that is very helpful. In New York City, this is the first year in New York City that there is ranked choice voting, meaning you can rank up to 5 candidates on the ballot. You can rank someone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is a way to ensure that your vote counts in many ways, depending on how the election goes. And then this is a way, a method that will encourage representation amongst Asian American candidates and candidates of color in historically underrepresented districts. But the question also is, what happens when the district does not, or the city or the state does not have ranked choice voting? And I would just say, in those scenarios, which exist in most of the cities and states in our country right now, it's just going to be important for there to be some type of diplomatic agreement, whether verbally or written, amongst the candidates, if there is a way to have that type of understanding, and so that while they are competitors, they do not have to be antagonistic, hostile competitors. That the best candidate can win, and that at the end of the day, the community can have representation.
I kind of want to follow up on that with one more question, and then maybe ask you a little bit about how you got into politics and consulting. But Trip, I'm wondering, since you've worked with so many candidates, kind of how you determine what makes a good candidate or someone who's going to be successful, what sets those people apart?
Yeah, there are certain objective things that you can look at. If someone has previously run for office before and is currently or previously been an elected official, that individual then has a demonstrated, track record of success. If the person has not been an elected official, but the person has run for office, and even if they have not won in the past, but they've demonstrated ability to really fundraise, earn endorsements, and earn the support of voters, that is also a helpful signaler as well. It's important also every cycle, for political operatives to know, have an honest assessment of the likelihood of winning. Sometimes we can make good predictions and sometimes we cannot. But some indicators in the past have been, how much have you fundraised? Do you have political endorsements in your current run? That is 50% of the game, is taking a look at some of these objective metrics. The other 50% is trusting your gut and trusting your instincts. I almost always trust my gut and my instincts with candidates. I think it's very important. I always try to sit down with the candidate in person if possible. If not, a Zoom call can suffice. But I want to get to know the person. I want to know their values. I want to feel if they're an authentic person. I want to know how they treat their staff. I want to know how they treat someone who doesn't support them. All of that is part of the EQ feeling out process. Quite candidly speaking, I don't want to, help elect a candidate who treats people poorly, even if they can raise $10 million. So 50% of it is looking at some of the metrics, money that they've raised, endorsements, past accomplishments, and the other 50% of it, try to get to know the person and trust your gut and instinct on them.
Yeah, I have no idea where the cliche that politics is about people came from, but I feel like that's so applicable in this situation. And I think it's interesting. I don't know if you're close in age to Hiling. You seem like you might be close in age, but maybe that's
I'm 32.
Just
I don't know how
Zoom filter. But I think it's interesting that you both have this interest in kind of influencing people. Hiling has done a lot of labor activism and is now running for office. But you've kind of gone another route. What got you into politics, and why consultancy kind of as your method of sort of like having an impact on your community?
Yeah. So I never planned to get into politics professionally. I had studied economics when I was in school. I had been interviewing at various banks in the New York and tri-state area, which is where I grew up in. And, it was really on something of a whim that I had applied to be an unpaid fellow for the Obama re-election campaign. This is going into 2012. And for some reason or another, they accepted me. And, I did a lot of volunteer work as an unpaid intern or fellow. And eventually they gave me a full-time staff position. And it's been something that has been very helpful for me in my career since. It leveraged me into being a campaign manager for Councilmember Margaret Chen, who is the first ever Chinese American woman to be elected to the New York City Council. It allowed me to be, gave me the experiences to help elect Jumaane Williams as his campaign manager. He is the only non-white citywide elected official in New York, and only the fourth ever Black New Yorker to be elected citywide. So this was really whimsical, and it was kind of an accident. I just didn't feel fulfilled, working in the financial industry, quite frankly. What was a big part of it. And to your second question, Katie, one of the reasons why I wanted to have an impact is because representation matters a lot to me. As I was coming up in this industry, I have found it was very easy for me to be pigeonholed, and other people who are non-white to be pigeonholed into very specific ethnic roles, right? We all know the whole, you're the Asian liaison, you're the Latino liaison, you're the African American liaison. But those types of positions, a lot of times in the political industry, do not come with high salaries. They do not come with influence, and they don't come with a voice. And this is me candidly speaking. And so I wanted to work my way up where I was in a position where I had decision-making authority, and I had real influence within a political organization. And I will say, one of my goals career-wise, thinking long-term, is to help grow Asian American political influence that comes with electing Asian American candidates, but that also comes with building a pipeline of high-level professional talent for Asian Americans, so that young Asian Americans can see this type of industry as a career choice that they can climb the ladder in and find success in. I think that is very, very important. When I first came in the game, I was often the only Asian American person in any type of political organization. That is starting to change very, very slowly, and we have much more work to do.
Yeah, I want to ask, what was it about that Obama campaign experience that really attracted you to being in politics more? It's a pretty big departure from working for a bank.
Yeah, I will say what inspired me about it is that I was an Asian American young man, and currently I'm still an Asian American, but a slightly less young man, who grew up in the New Jersey, in North Jersey, right outside Manhattan, and I was assigned to work and organize and to recruit volunteers in rural Iowa, in a traditionally Democrat, but had been leaning Republican area of rural country Iowa. And needless to say, there were the lived experiences were different, but they were similar in that I was drawn to the communities longing for public servants and elected officials who cared about the forgotten American, who cared about, in this case, marginalized being low income, or marginalized being, individuals, Iowans who felt left behind by the recession, by the economy. That type of working class struggle was really multiracial. I think it brings us all together. It reflects a lot of how I approach my work when I consult on campaigns. I always tell the campaigns constantly, it is important to build a multiracial coalition. Or, in a state that may not be as diverse, you have to build a multi-layered coalition where you're bringing together people with different lived experiences. And, you know, for some reason or another, by the end of my experience in Iowa, and this was almost a decade ago, I had simply connected with people. They looked very different from me. They had a very different lived experience than me, but I could sense, you know, they had their struggle and challenges in their lives, and I certainly had those in mine. And there was a bonding of you know, trying to work towards a fairer, more inclusive, better country for all of us Americans. And that really hooked me onto it. You know, if I could figure this out professionally, if I could connect with people in a very, very different part of the country, I knew I could. I knew I had an opportunity to succeed anywhere.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic, hopeful note. And we will wrap it up with our last thing that we always do, which is I will ask each of you to recommend a book to our audience when we're not talking about politics on this show. We're talking about books. So Hailing, you can go first, and then Trip, and we will say goodbye because I know you guys have a busy day today.
I will recommend a book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Okay.
I really liked a book called The Last Lecture. It was by a former professor at Carnegie Mellon University. It was a really reflective, contemplative book written by someone who was nearing the time where he would pass away. And the book was written over a decade ago. And here, now and again, I still come back to it. It's called The Last Lecture. It just makes you, it certainly makes me want to live every day to the fullest when you read a book from an author from that perspective.
Okay.
Wow, we will. Oh, go ahead.
It's okay. I just think it's every time I visit New York, have a lunch, dinner with all your guys. Next time is I'm going to treat another sake. Okay, really enjoy talking with you. So it's that we can drink together next time. Thank you.
Well, Haley's got to be invited too. And
yeah,
you know,
for sure. Yeah.
And Katie, if you're ever in town,
I'll let you know.
Exactly. You know, there's certainly some more good stories to be told.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will wrap it up there for this week. Don, Hailing, Trip, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.